Good afternoon, members. It's the appointed time and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the panel on security. Agenda item 1, information papers issued since the meeting on the 6th of May 2025. Since the last regular meeting, the Secretariat issued an information paper provided by the administration. The title of the paper is Proposed Revision of Fees for Services under the Purview of the Immigration Department. It's LC paper number CB bracket 21042/2025 bracket 01. If members find it necessary to discuss this paper at this meeting, please inform the Secretariat by 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 29th of May. Well, as at the 29th of May, the Secretariat did not receive any comments from members on the information paper. According to the administration, amendments will be made to the Immigration Regulations Cap 115A and the Schedule to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region Passports Ordinance Cap 539. The fee revision will take effect starting from September this year. Agenda item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. Please refer to LC paper number CB bracket 21049/2025 bracket 01 for the list of outstanding items for discussion and the list of follow-up actions. That's LC paper number CB bracket 21049/2025 bracket 02. The two sets of papers have been issued to members for reference. The July meeting was scheduled for the 8th of July, but the administration suggests rescheduling it for the 7th of July 2025 at 2:30 p.m. So please jot it down. Do members have any views on this rescheduling? All right. The Security Bureau suggests discussing the following two items at the meeting in July. Operation of land boundary control points and latest progress of redevelopment projects. That's the first item on the list of outstanding items for discussion. The second item for discussion, it's the second item on the list of outstanding items for discussion. It's youth development work of the Security Bureau and its departments. Do members agree? All right, that's the discussion item that we will discuss in the next meeting. Agenda item 3. Developing the next generation communications system. This item will be discussed until 3:30 p.m. We have this meeting room until 4:30 p.m., so we have to observe the time limit. I welcome Mr. Chris Tang, Secretary for Security, Ms. Vincy Chen, Principal Assistant Secretary, to brief us on this item. If members recall, the administration gave an initial briefing to this panel on the proposal about the new generation of communications system in April 2023. And the administration plans to seek funding approval from the Finance Committee in the 2025-26 financial year to take forward the project. The administration will consult members on the funding proposal at this meeting. As this item is a funding proposal, all members of this council are invited to join the discussion of this item. The Secretariat has prepared the background information for members' reference. Please refer to LC paper number CB bracket 21049/2025 bracket 04. I believe members have already received this background brief. Members, according to Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedures, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to this item, you may not speak on this item or move any motion or amendments in relation to this item unless you have disclosed the nature of the interest before you speak. If you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to this item, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak. Mr. Chris Tang, when you are ready, please walk us through the paper, number CB bracket 21049/2025 bracket 03. Members who'd like to speak, please press the request to speak button. Over to you, Mr. Chris Tang. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members. I will consult members' views on the funding proposal in relation to the next generation communications system. In April 2023, I briefed this panel on the system. We are to build a safe, reliable, and stable, as well as sustainable communication system to enhance efficiency concerning the provision of emergency services, and this is also to mitigate the risk brought by geopolitical tensions. Currently, frontline officers have to rely on the CCCS, that is the existing system for communications. The system has been launched since 2004. It makes use of TETRA, which is a standard developed by the European Telecommunication Standards Institute. TETRA is used in the daily operation, and it could only allow for transmission of voice and simple text messages, and therefore messages are transmitted in a phlegmatic manner, and frontline commanders cannot have a full grasp of the frontline situation with the technology. The current maintenance contract will expire in 2027. With rapid development of the technology, suppliers that provide services concerning TETRA are on decline, and because of geopolitical reasons, a lot of TETRA-related technologies are no longer being exported to Hong Kong, so we can no longer adopt this technology. 5G communications as well as the relevant devices are quite mature. Global law enforcement and agencies have been making use of 5G instead of TETRA now. Also, the Office of the Communications Authority have reserved suitable 5G spectrum for safe public communications. That's why we think that it is appropriate for us to use 5G instead of TETRA now. This will allow us to enhance the transmission of audio messages as well as images. This will be more efficient, and this will avoid delays. Also, people nowadays are used to providing pictures or videos to the police in reporting cases to us. The new system will allow frontline officers to more efficiently deal with information and enhance the efficiency in providing emergency services, especially during bad weather and disasters. And this will allow us to compete against time in saving lives. In terms of the new system, we propose a hybrid model. That is, the system will be developed by the government, complemented by commercial services. We will rent commercial services to ensure the safety of this critical communication services. This will ensure wide network coverage. In April 2023, members of this panel supported this system, as this will allow the police to make use of new technology, and this will enhance cost effectiveness. We have adopted members' views. The police have reviewed the needs for using the system, and we have taken into consideration the public financial challenges that we face. Therefore, we adopted a pragmatic attitude as we come up with the design of the system. We hope that without posing any adverse impacts, we will adopt the new system. Specifically speaking, over the past 2 years, we have paid attention to the development of the latest technology, and we will adopt a market-oriented approach. We have done surveys to understand the prices of different types of products, and we will opt for the products that are cheaper to save costs. In terms of design, we will ensure safety. The police have simplified the design of the system. For example, the system required 2 types of hardware for 2 different target groups. Now we will only adopt a hardware that require a special types of firewall. Through the above strategies, we hope that while we're able to satisfy our needs, we will maximize the cost effectiveness. The latest estimate will significantly reduce from $5.2 billion to about $2 billion, which represents a drop of about 60%. We got the support from the panel last time, and the police conducted parallel tendering. However, taking into account the operation of our work will affect the safety as well as national security and so on. We have taken into consideration geopolitical risks, and we want more reliable systems and more reliable supply chain. We need to ensure the sustainability of the long-term use of the system. Therefore, in the interest of the public, we will cancel the tendering and we will adopt a direct procurement approach as we procure the system. All in all, we want to build a safe and reliable communication network to satisfy the needs of our work. We want to adopt a multimedia system to ensure the safety of the public, and we want to tie in with the overall direction of building Hong Kong into a smart city. This is in line with the global trend. Even with fiscal challenges, we want to enhance the cost effectiveness of the system. We want to adopt a new mindset. We have taken into consideration members' views offered last time, and we have tried to reduce the budget from $5 billion to about $2 billion. I hope the panel will continue to support this program. Thank you. I thank Mr. Chris Tang for the briefing. I believe that members of this panel, as well as those who are taking part in discussion, are aware that the police have cancelled the tendering procedure and that you will adopt a direct procurement approach. 8 members have asked to speak. They are Deputy Chair Mr. Kitson Yang, Mr. Benson Look, Mr. Chen Pui Leung, Mr. Edmund Wong, Mr. Dennis Leung, Dr. Johnny Mr. Bill Tang, and Mr. Dominic Lee. Deputy Chair Mr. Kitson Yang will go first. Thank you. I'd like to commend the effort of Mr. Chris Tang. Even with the fiscal challenges, the administration has managed to save some $3 billion of public money for all of us. I see that the new technologies will allow us to have a better recording of the different cases. My first question is, how did Secretary manage to save so much money in procuring this system? Is it because of direct procurement? If that's the case, will you continue to adopt the direct procurement approach to help save money of the public coffers? Well, you mentioned about national security, and we aren't able to get the Tetra technology from other countries, and is this the major consideration for you to use the new system? Thirdly, you mentioned about 5G base stations. According to the paper, the government will run the base stations independently. Will the base stations be built and developed by the government, or will you rent the base stations offered by the operators in the market? Secretary, 3 questions. I thank the member for the questions. Firstly, I would like to explain how we managed to save so much money. Over the past 2 years, because of technology development, we have chosen the most suitable technology. This includes the cable enhancement technology or antenna enhancement technology. This allows us to develop a fewer number of base stations. Also, we have adopted the base station frequency co-sharing approach. We will share base stations with service operators to reduce redundant coverage. Also, 5G communication technology have become more common, so the technology is cheaper nowadays. Also, I mentioned that originally we opted for 2 types of hardware, but we've simplified the design and we only need one single hardware that's a very reliable firewall, and that helps reduce costs on hardwares and components. Also, we're adopting a pragmatic approach in terms of the capacity specification. We thought we would have the capacity for 10,000 people, but we probably don't need such a high capacity, so we have managed to save costs in this regard.
Secondly, on direct procurement, well, that has directly got to do with national security. So it's not really about saving money, because last time when we did the simultaneous or parallel tendering, we noticed that if we were to adopt this approach, then we would not be able to rule out the use of certain types of products. And then because of geopolitical factors, they might no longer supply those products to us, or that they might not be safe and secure. And therefore, to rule that out, we will have to ensure that we would no longer be able to use the traditional or conventional tendering exercise, because by adopting that approach, we would not be able to rule out the use of certain brands or certain products. And therefore, we have also considered whether or not we should adopt this restricted tender approach. But basically, after we have looked at what's available in the market, those products that are truly able to provide us with the type of security that we need might not be readily available, and therefore we decided to adopt this direct procurement approach. And you also refer to the base stations under the 5G network or system. Well, basically what is in use is that there are 2 aspects. We basically have the government-oriented and then commercial-based base stations. In other words, the government will be building its own base stations, and at the same time, we would also be hiring some commercial base stations. But of course, we will have to ensure safety, and also the priority of use would also be set so that on the one hand would be able to save money, on the other hand it would also be highly efficient and secure. Thank you. My apologies, I did not limit the time. So 4 minutes, including both questions and answers. Next, Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, for the new generation of communication systems, the procurement arrangements have been adopted based on national security and political considerations and so on. And as a result, you have decided to adopt this direct engagement approach in order to identify the more secure suppliers, and you have been able to reduce the cost substantially from 5.2 billion to $2.1 billion, and that is what we would fully support. And also in para 8, you also said that because of geopolitical tensions and some of the technology products would not be made available to Hong Kong. And you also said that for the Tetra system that has been in use, well, that would also be affected by the new circumstances. So can you explain to us to what extent will our existing system be affected by these new factors? And also, other than the geopolitical tensions, I believe that it's always better to prevent something from happening, because such consequences could be dire and disastrous. Because if you look at the conflict between Palestine and Israel, you can see that they've used pages to mount the attack operations, and you can see that they've prepared for that for 10 years. And in other words, they've actually installed bombs in the pages many years ago. So you can see that it's really very dangerous, and therefore you will have to ensure that the products that we procure before they are put to use, how can you ensure that they are safe? In particular, for frontline officers using such pages and communication tools, well, would they be undergoing certain security checks and so on? And thirdly, well, very often in procuring such products, you would also have to take into account national security and other geopolitical factors and so on. For example, in making or placing orders for communication systems and so on. So on this occasion, we have proven that direct procurement would be able to provide us with cheaper and safer products. And in the future, whenever there are products or systems involving national security and geopolitical factors, would we also adopt this approach in order to make sure that it's cheaper and safer? Thank you. Well, first, indeed, the Tetra system has indeed meant that we will not be able to get certain products because they've already made it clear that they are no longer prepared to supply those products to that, and therefore we have no alternative but to switch to the 5G system. And yes, despite the fact that they are no longer supplying such spare parts to us, within the police force, we also have technology departments which would be able to help us, even though they are no longer supplying such spare parts to us. We will still be able to support our own system. We would be able to switch to the new 5G system, and therefore our existing operation has not been affected at all. And secondly, about geopolitical factors affecting our use of technology, and therefore in our procurement exercises we have to take into account national security. For example, we will vet such companies to look at their backgrounds, and we would also be checking whether or not the equipment would be subject to external forces, and also would they be planting something in it so that after a couple of years or after some years something untoward might happen. And therefore we will have to be very careful in choosing the right products and right suppliers. And we would also adopt this surveillance system because we do have national security surveillance. So other than the physical security of the products, we would also have to make sure that in the process of construction and installation, national security factors would be deeply taken into account at every step of the way. And also, we believe that national security consideration is necessary, but then does that mean that every procurement exercise has to put this as our top priority? For example, we would also have to procure stationery and other products. So long as they do not have any national security implications, we believe that we should still adopt the conventional method of open tender and so on. Next, Mr. Chen Pui Leung. Thank you, Madam Chair. In developing the new generation communication system for the medium to long term use, you would have to adopt this direct procurement approach because of national security considerations and so on. I can fully understand that. But then if we were to adopt this direct procurement approach, according to the director, well, not many suppliers would be available, and in fact, you would only be able to approach one single supplier. So, in my view, for this single supplier, if there were to be any problems in the future, then will we be able to resolve those problems on our own? Should something untoward happens, will we be able to deal with that? That's my first question. The second question is, with regard to the cost involved, yes, you have been able to substantially reduce it by a very wide margin so that it now costs only about $2 billion, and you've already explained to us the reasons why you've been able to do so. So given the fact that you've been able to substantially lower the cost, well, comparing the current design and the previous design, does that mean that the function or functionality of the new system would be somewhat less or inferior to the previous design? Because after all, you're talking about a very substantial reduction of cost. And also, in para 17, you also talk about the new system which would require hiring some commercial facilities in order to use it. So when you hire commercial network or services, in terms of net security and so on, would there be problems? Because after all, it's a commercial operation, and if there should be anything happening to their network, will that affect the communication system's effectiveness? And also in the future, you're talking about a 5G system, and we are actually starting to develop the next generation 6G system. Should the system be upgraded to 6G, will that system be able to cope? So 3 questions altogether. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, in terms of national security, we're going to adopt this direct procurement approach. Does that mean that we have no choice, and would there be risk? In fact, we have already taken that into account. For example, for the spare parts and so on, we have already looked into the models available. In fact, there is more than one. And therefore, if there should be any problem with the existing model, we will still have alternatives. But of course, given the fact that there is only one single exclusive supplier, if something untoward should happen, of course, that would also affect the progress. And if we were to identify another supplier, of course, that would have some impact. But then by deciding on this direct procurement approach, we have already conducted very detailed vetting on the background of this company. And we have also found out how it's going to operate and so on. So we have already satisfied ourselves that it's okay. And we have also have fallback options. And you also talk about the functionality. As I explained, how the way we're going to use it is that we have already enhanced the design. For example, initially we would have to have 2 sets of hardware, and now we can have 1 set of hardware with built-in firewalls. And also for the security coefficient is no longer set at a the initial high level, and now we have been able to do what we want with lower security functions. So all these have been adopted without affecting our operational efficiency, and therefore is now cheaper and still equally efficient. And also on the issue of hiring commercial systems, well, in the terms and conditions of service, we have already made it clear that well, we would have this priority clause. In other words, in congested areas, for example, if there should be a fireworks display, then we would have the priority in using the network so that the system will not be crowded out or would not be congested because of the concentration of people. And also, if there are certain technical reasons affecting the network's operation, then we will still be able to have a fallback system which has been built by the government, even though, it might not be as efficient as the commercial system. Still, we have the alternative. And also, as you know, 6G system is being developed. We have no idea as to what it would involve. Still, the system should have some extra capacity so that hopefully the new technology should be accommodated under the existing system. Next up, Mr. Edmund Wong. Yes, the old system has been in use for some 20 years, and also because of the geopolitical environment, we would no longer be able to use the system, and you've been able to reduce the cost substantially from $5.2 billion to $2 billion. I would support that. Still, I'm concerned that by adopting this direct procurement approach, would we be setting a precedent for what's to come next? So have we had any precedents of adopting a direct procurement approach? If this is the first time that we have done so, then do we have any checks and balance in place to ensure that it's still safe? And you also said that you would be adopting this dual system approach. That is, you have your own system. You would also be hiring some commercial networks, and you also refer to the situation whereby there might be fireworks display, and as a result, there might be many people using the system. And yet you would have terms and conditions included in the contract to make sure that the government will have priority in using the network. But then if there are major incidents, the demand for use of the system would be very substantial. For example, the emergency officers and so on. So how can you ensure the safety of the network, and also how can you ensure that you will have priority in using the system? And also in remote areas, they might also have blind spots. So would the new system be able to minimize such blind spots in order to enhance our efficiency in rescue operations? And also, for the time being, the system will be used by the police force, but then for the Security Bureau and other departments, different departments would also be using communication systems, for example, the immigration and also the customs and excise department and so on. So will you be sharing the system with other discipline services so as to minimize the need for them to procure similar systems requiring communications functionalities? Thank you, Madam Chair. On direct procurement, well, as far as the SAR government is concerned, as a common practice, as far as I could recall, well, recently, for example, the CCTV system of the police force had also adopted a similar approach, and also for the Marine Police, they've also adopted this approach to procure its communication systems, and the Development Bureau has also done the same. So we do have a very stringent system in place to ensure that even though we adopt this direct procurement approach, it's still very safe and secure. And secondly, about the security of priority use. Basically, that would be part of the contract, and also we have to ensure that in emergency situations, the government will still have priority in using the system, because we have had incidents whereby in crowded places, there might be many people using the system at the same time. But then we have already ensured that in the contractual terms, the government and the police will have priority in using the system, and therefore there is no question of us not being able to use the system. And also, the third question is about in rural areas, will the government be able to use such system? That's the reason precisely why we have to hire commercial systems that would cover the that would ensure that we will have comprehensive coverage. That is because we have our own government system, and therefore we have government base stations, so that in remote areas there would be coverage, because commercial operations would rarely cover those areas. And also in emergency situations, we will also be able to rely or fall back onto our own systems. And also in shopping centers and so on, there might also be blind spots because commercial networks have been working very well in commercial centers and so on, and therefore we will have to rely on both. And the next question is about whether or not other departments and bureaus can use the system. Indeed, for example, the Fire Services Department would also have to operate in the fire scenes and also in indoor areas, and therefore they would also have to ensure that the penetration power of the system would have to be very strong. And therefore, we would also be distributing the system to different discipline services, so that where there are joint operations, they would also be able to use it.
Mr. Edmund Wong, you have a follow-up question, right? Yes. Say this system is used in rural areas or in the fringes of country parks. How much can the system cover? How wide a coverage would it be? You mentioned that the government will also build its own base stations instead of relying solely on commercial service providers. Say in large-scale operations or events, when there are fireworks, for example, would the government deploy mobile vehicles to enhance the coverage of the network, because there are such services in other places? Secretary. There shouldn't be any blind spots in terms of our design of the base stations. The network might be weaker in more remote areas, but we think that there should be enough coverage. Secondly, Mr. Edmund Wong is right that if necessary, there will be mobile base stations to enhance network coverage and reception. No more follow-up questions from me. Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, I'll draw a line after Mr. Dennis Leung has spoken. If members would like to speak, please press the Request to Speak button now. Mr. Dennis Leung. Madam Chair, this system has been in use since 2004 for some 20 years. This system is getting old, so it's necessary for us to replace it. In 2019, during the Black Clad violence, some criminals made use of the 5G communications technology. So it is necessary for us to step up the communications capacity within the police force. I was once in the police force. This paper from the administration does not mention about how the new system can surpass the TECTRA technology. In the past, we had to carry a couple of devices, and we also have a baton as well as a gun with us. Nowadays, police officers even have to carry a camera for real-time communication purposes. And the police officer also has to carry a mobile phone with him. Not to mention that they have to carry other first aid devices and water, for example. Will there be an all-in-one device or kit that consists of all the equipment a police officer needs? A police officer may have to run after a suspect, and they'll have to run with these devices. Also, paragraph 13 mentions about the timetable, and this is to tie in with the funding arrangement from year 2027-28 to 2031-32. The base stations will be built in 3 stages, but there is no mention about how many base stations will be developed at each stage. Can you tell us more about this? Also, will there be a smooth transition from old base stations to new ones? I hope there won't be any so-called gray area that would affect the efficiency of law enforcement by the police officers. Well, these questions have not been asked by other members. Well, please try to phrase your questions in news perspectives. Secretary, please. The 5G system is way better than the Tetra system. Currently, the system can only permit transmission of pictures and text. In future, this new system will allow us to transmit voice messages, pictures, and videos. And it will also provide positioning services. We'll be able to step up security with this system. The system will be compatible with IoT technology. This is something that the current system cannot achieve. Mr. Leung asked whether this new system can replace mobile phone or cameras. Technically speaking, yes, because you can make use of this system for making phone calls and so on. However, should we use this system solely? For example, I may have to contact the console operators and to report certain information. I may also have to make phone calls to inform colleagues about certain things. If you rely on one sole device, we may not be able to multitask. Under certain circumstances, we may be able to allow for an all-in-one system. In other circumstances, say if I have to make phone calls and do other things at the same time, we may have to make use of several devices. For the first phase, we will build 5% of the base stations. Phase 2, we will reach 55%, and by phase 3, all base stations will be developed. Thank you. Dr. Johnny Ng. I declare that I am an independent director of Chinese communication. 2 years ago, we thought we would have to spend some $5 billion on this system. Now, learning that the administration can reduce cost and enhance efficiency, I give my support to this system. The administration is adopting the direct engagement approach, and according to the Secretary, this is not the single case where we adopt this approach. Can the Secretary tell us more about the standards where we will adopt the direct engagement approach with more complex geopolitical environment? The police force, as well as other disciplined services department or other government departments, may have to adopt the same approach in the future. Under what circumstances will they be allowed to adopt this approach? Secondly, 5G communication technologies has emerged for some time now. Normally, this technology spans a cycle of 6 years to 10 years. The latest technology is known as 5G, 5.5G. I believe that 6G will emerge within 5 to 10 years' time. 5.5G is faster than 5G by 5 to 10 times, so I want to know if the system can support 5.5G technology. Secretary, on the question about the direct engagement approach, according to the government procurement procedures and the relevant agreements, as they are in line with the procurement procedures set by the WTO, we have to first consider national security to ensure effective procurement. Secondly, if it is absolutely necessary and that there are no other alternatives, we will adopt this approach. Thirdly, when there are emergencies, we will adopt this approach. So it is only under these three circumstances that we will adopt the direct engagement approach. For this case, we have taken into consideration national security when we adopt this approach. We cannot specify which model we're going to use, or we cannot rule out certain models we want to use. During the first tendering exercise, we found that there are products that might not be continuously supplied to us in the future. So through normal procurement procedure, we may not be able to procure such products because of certain safety risks. And the direct engagement approach is in line with the WTO framework. Now, on the technology front, normally these systems can be in use for 10 years. But the years of service is not the ultimate consideration on our part. As mentioned by Dr. Ng, technology develops rapidly. 5G communications can be compatible with this system. This system can also be compatible with 5.5G and 6G technologies. However, we do not know how rapidly technology will develop. If technology develops way faster than we imagine, we may have to adopt a newer system by then. Mr. Bill Tang. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. Because of national security reasons, the administration will adopt the direct engagement approach. There will be direct communication between the administration and the relevant contractor. Is this system tailor-made for us? Is that exclusive for the SAR government? That means even other governments or organizations want to procure the same system, they won't be able to find the identical system. We want to know whether this is a tailor-made system because of national security reasons. The recurrent expenditure for the existing system is about $59 million. Now you're asking for a funding of $2 billion. To maintain this system, how much money will be spent annually? Or will there not be such a recurrent expenditure in the future? Because there is no mention of this figure in the paper. Now, other than national security risks or reasons, we are curious what kind of services or procurement of services will require the adoption of this approach. Hong Kong abides by the trade principle set by the WTO. We have to adhere to this principle. We have to tell the international community that we have a transparent mechanism in place. Under what circumstances do we have to adopt the direct engagement approach that deviates from the principle set by the WTO? I think you have to explain to people about this. Secretary, on the third question, you mentioned that this approach is in line with the government procurement procedures as well as the WTO framework. You mentioned about three circumstances. First, when there are national security risks, and second, when there are no alternatives, and thirdly, when there are emergencies. How do you decide whether there are national security risks? Yes, for example, have you consulted certain advisory committee or board within the government before you make this decision? Secretary, this system is definitely a tailor-made one. Each law enforcement agency has different needs. However, the devices that we are going to use are not exclusive for our use. Say, the chips that we're going to use, they might be used by others. It's just like you are buying a suit. It may be tailor-made for you, but the suit may adopt the materials that other people can use. Now, turning to the question about recurrent expenditure, the recurrent expenditure will be about $90 million. Currently, we are spending $50 million per year. It is necessary for us to spend this money to upgrade this system. Is not about reducing costs, it's about enhancing efficiency, and to tie in with technology development, we have to have this system, and there will be a maintenance cost.
On the third point is about our procurement approach. In fact, in the Code of Practice of Procurement, it has already been made clear that national security will definitely have to be taken into account. In fact, to the extent that we might even cancel the contract for national security concerns. But then we have already consulted the DFJ to look at the situation, and they have already confirmed that what we are doing is in line with national security considerations. Next, Mr. Chow Man Kwong. Thank you. I welcome the proposal by the administration because back in 2023, we already discussed the $5 billion funding proposal, and we expressed our concern, and now they've been able to reduce it by some $3 billion, and therefore it's a good thing. And the security head also talk about national or international standards, and the fact that either the US or Europe might also ban us from using certain products and so on. And therefore, I think so long as we can comply with the WTO's procurement requirements, is okay. And there are several points that I'd like to raise. Well, for the new generation communication systems, 6 discipline services will be able to use it together. But I wonder if this is the case, because on coming Friday, they're going to have a funding proposal for the wireless telecommunication systems, which will cost about $20 million. That's proposed by the Customs and Excise. So can that be integrated with the system? And secondly, in terms of the building of base stations, I remember back in 2023, you said that some 500 base stations will be required. So I'd like to know whether or not the $2 billion would already cover these base stations, because it's not mentioned in the paper. Last but not least, well, under the latest plan, the recurrent expenditure would be about $96.4 million. So because this is about a new system, when compared to the old system, what are the differences? Is it more or is it less? Can you tell us? Bureau Director, first, is about the CNS system. And as I said, individual departments would also have to look at the uniqueness of their operations in designing their own systems. For example, the CNS would also have to look at certain border checkpoints and also some smuggling by sea operations and so on. But then the system is not costing a lot because you're talking about just several $10 million. And also, when we mount major operations involving other discipline services, the coverage might be more, and also the amount, the level of services might be high, and therefore there is a need for us to have co-operations or core systems so that we can jointly use such systems. And initially we talk about some 500 base stations. Now, according to our latest estimate, we only need about 300 that would already serve the coverage of the initially proposed 500 stations. So we will need about 350. And the third question is about recurrent expenditure that would cover the service charge, because we will be using such services, and the base stations are repair and maintenance, and also the system itself would also have to be regularly maintained. and also for the transmission systems and also staff costs, because we do need to have contractors providing the services to us, and those would contribute to the main part of the recurrent expenditure. Next, Doreen Kong. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I support the replacement of the communication systems, and I'm also pleased to see that the Security Bureau has been able to compress the cost from $5.2 to $2 billion. It's a very substantial cut. And also, in terms of the efficiency of the system, you've been able to have audio, video, and images transmitted. I think it's good. But, well, in the past, I managed to make reports, and despite the fact that I was able to shoot images and so on, I was not able to send them to the police because the system now in use can only transmit voice messages. So I'm glad to see that the new system will be able to have audio, video, and image coverage. And in overseas jurisdictions, they've already used broadband technology for a long time. It's a global trend. So my question for the Bureau Director is, can you give us some examples as to how overseas jurisdictions have been able to use broadband, and also in terms of installation cost, would that be comparable to our system? And also, I can understand that in different places, the situation might be different. Can you provide us with such statistics for consideration? And before the installation, you would also have to have training and so on. So can you ensure that there would be seamless transition to the new system? And also in Para 17, you also said that you might also have to hire commercial network in order to make the best use of these transmission stations and so on. Once commercial operations are involved, well, there might be fluctuation in terms of prices. So how can you ensure that within a reasonable period, the price will remain stable? Bureau Director. Well, you asked about overseas costs. Well, in many overseas countries, they have already used 5G systems, and many are doing the same as we do. That is, they would use their own government built systems in order to ensure national security. In our research, we have found out that most countries would do the same. For example, in 2018, in South Korea, they spent some 8.4 billion Hong Kong dollars on their system, and then in 2019, well, the UK also spent about 95.2 billion Hong Kong dollars to build their system, and then in 2017, France also did the same. They spent some 6.1 billion Hong Kong dollars to build the base stations, but then that would not cover. They spent about 6.1 billion dollars to build their system. That would exclude the construction of base stations. And you also asked about whether or not we can ensure seamless transition. Yes, indeed, because as I said, we are no longer relying on this U.S. supplier to do the repair and maintenance for us. We have already developed our own system to the extent that we would also be able to take up the repair and maintenance responsibilities ourselves. So we can also ensure that both the voice-centric system as well as the audio, video, and image system can coexist. What if commercial rates go up? Well, there are two approaches. First, we hope that we can sign a longer-term contract so as to ensure that price in the foreseeable future will remain stable. And as you said, sometimes circumstances cannot be foreseen. Sometimes prices can come down as well. And therefore, we would also be looking at to what extent has that changed and whether or not is still affordable. And then we would decide what we would do next. Thank you. Earlier on, I draw a line, and now we still have time, and therefore I am prepared to allow Mr. Ma Fong Kwok to ask questions as well. Now, Mr. Lee Chan Kang. Yes, the police force would like to develop a new generation communication systems. I support it because the current system has been in use for a long time. But I'd like to ask a few technical questions. And I'm very pleased to see that looking at the new system in terms of its capacity in accommodating other systems, I think it's good because in our country, in some cities, they are already testing out with 5G or even 5GA systems. And assuming that by 2030, the new system will be in full operation, I'm sure you would be able to upgrade the network so that it will be able to work under enhanced systems. And I have a question about recurrent expenditure, because on point C, in terms of the sharing of our services and also the transmission systems and so on, you would also need to hire commercial systems, and every year that would cost you about $26 billion. So it's close to $27 million. So on this, I'd like to ask, well, for the network supplier, has it been fixed, or is it that you have already approached all the network suppliers in Hong Kong? So how do you set the priority? So would you be telling the network supplier that because of the network coverage and so on, well, would you be able to have a dual mode of operation so that you'll be able to accommodate their system as well? And also in the border area, would that system jump to some mainland network and so on? And what if it switch over to the mainland network? Or would there be technical or technical devices that would ensure that you would still be able to use it? Okay, on our network supplier, well, basically we have approached all network suppliers in Hong Kong, so it's not just one single supplier that would be providing the service. That would also make it easier for us to deal with the prices. And secondly, you talk about border areas. Well, basically, we would be using our own base stations to cover those areas. And if we're using our own base stations, you can ensure basically that all the border areas can be covered. If we were to use commercial networks, then in some cases, the system would automatically switch to their mainland counterpart systems, and that would not be good for us. And therefore, we would be using our own base stations and we'll be using our own networks. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask as the last one to ask questions. Well, I'm pleased to see that through the hard work of the Bureau, you've been able to resolve some of the issues that we raised in 2023. You've been able to substantially cut the cost by some 60%. And given the current fiscal position of the government, I think we should commend such efforts. And that's also a very important consideration. And you talk about cancelling the parallel tendering exercise because of geopolitical considerations and national security concerns. I would agree. And of course, geopolitical factors have to be taken into account. But then I still have a concern. That is, after this change to a direct procurement approach, in terms of the supply chain security or stability, and also in terms of information security, will you still be able to achieve the same target? For example, for some of the potential suppliers, well, have you looked at their past track record and also the source of the technology and also the security standards and also where do they manufacture the hardware and so on? How can you ensure that they would be able to meet our needs? And also the existing system, will part of it be kept so that in the future the two systems can coexist? And what about compatibility with each other? Would there be any problems? And also, do we need to have the system connected with some overseas system? And if that is the case, then will there be problems? Okay, 3 questions from Mr. Ma, and they have not been asked before. Bureau Director. Yes, if we, well, under the direct procurement approach, the company that we are going to award the contract would definitely be a company with a very good track record, and it is also competent. And if you look at their past track records, they are very experienced and they are a major supplier, and the equipment that they would use would definitely be in line with national security requirements. They are very good quality, and therefore you can rest assured that they are okay. And also after the completion of the system, that would also the system would also be compatible with the 5G system. And whether or not there might be some teething problems and so on. Well, initially, the old system will still be in use before the new system is fully commissioned. So once the 5G system is smooth in operation, then we will see how we can phase out the old system. And thirdly, this system is mainly for the purpose of the police force in enforcing the law within Hong Kong, and therefore there is no question of connecting it to some overseas systems. But then what about the marine police? They might also have to go to the public seas, and also in some emergency situations, they might also have to go beyond Hong Kong waters or Hong Kong's territory in undertaking rescue operations. Will the system be able to cope? Well, Mr. Ma, this is a good point. Well, the marine police has its own system. Well, the police force does not just have this 5G system. Some special units would also have their own system. For example, marine police would have its own communication system. As you said, they might have to go to the public seas, say in rescue operations, and therefore they would also have to communicate with others. And therefore there would be a special arrangement or system for the marine police. Can I ask a supplementary question? That is about contingency costs, because members have asked you many questions from different perspectives. But then for contingency costs, generally speaking, it should be 10%. But then in your case, it's only 5%. What are the considerations?
We adopt a pragmatic attitude. We've made the calculations. We think that 5% offers a safety net for us, so we set it at 5%. I know that if I reduce the percentage and have to increase it again, I'll have to come back to LegCo for funding. So I have to strike a balance here. We believe that 5% will be enough to offer a safety net for us. Well, I appreciate your pragmatic attitude. I'd like to ask members if you agree to submit this funding proposal to the Finance Committee for consideration. We all agree? Well, in fact, most members who've spoken, they mentioned that they are in support of this proposal. Thank you, Secretary. We will wrap up this item now. Now we come to agenda item 4. Stepping up the fight against space oil drug through tightening of the control of atomidate analogues and drug situation in Hong Kong. I'll have the clerk invite the government representatives to join us first. We have Mr. Kesson Lee, Commissioner for Narcotics, Ms. Jenny Chen, Principal Assistant Secretary from the Security Bureau, and we also have representatives from the Hong Kong Police Force attending this item. Let's have the government representatives join us first. Members who'd like to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. According to the usual practice, the Commissioner for Narcotics come to LegCo to report to us about the drug situation in Hong Kong as well as the anti-drug effort made by the government. Members may pose questions, and the Commissioner may also offer or provide us with any amendment proposals, if there are any. This March, the administration told us about the harm of space oil drug and about the government's educational and publicity effort. The administration undertook to report to us about its anti-drug effort, and this proposal has to do with a legislative amendment concerning the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance, Cap 134. Well, because this has to do with a legislative amendment proposal, members from other panels or all members from this council are invited to attend this item. Dr. Chow Meng Kong mentioned that he would like us to discuss newly emerged drugs as well as strategies and measures, so we will discuss this in this item as well. Please refer to CB bracket 21049/2025 bracket 06, the background brief prepared by the Legislative Secretariat. Commissioner, when you are ready, please walk us through the paper. I know that you have a PowerPoint presentation. Madam Chair, members, the SAR government has all along attached importance to our anti-drug work. In March this year, we reported to members about our educational and publicity efforts. At this meeting, we will update members on the major trend concerning drugs. I will make use of a PowerPoint presentation. Paragraph 3 and 6 as well as the Annex A have already set out all the figures. According to CRDA of the administration, the number of reported abusers dropped by 42% from 2015 to 2024. The total number of reported drug abuses in 2024 decreased by 9% as compared with 2023. As for young people, the number of reported young drug abusers aged under 21 rose by 8% to 720 compared to 2023. It is believed that more people have consumed space oil drugs, and 494 people were reported to have drugs for the first time. And in 2023, the 5 major drugs dropped from 13,000 tons to about 13,000. The most common types of reported drugs abused is heroin, followed by cocaine and methamphetamine. However, as for 2024, space oil drugs is the 3rd most common drugs abused by young people. Now I'll turn to other figures. In year 2024, among all reported drug abusers, 300 of them were reported to have consumed space oil drug. 70% of them are young people aged under 21. In Q1 this year, 191 people reported to have abused space oil drugs, and 70% of them are people aged under 21. The youngest reported to have taken space oil drugs is 12 years old. Young people who take drugs mostly is because of peer influence as well as depression and stress. The government is determined to safeguard people's health. We will work towards these 5 directions: that's prevention, education and publicity, research, rehabilitation, service, cooperation, as well as legislation and enforcement. We are in face of changes in the drug situation. The government has been coping with the changes. Normally, we include substances under the control of the 2 major ordinances. Having made careful consideration, we are proposing to LegCo to include some substances under the ordinances. The first proposal has to do with space oil drug. We suggest to include space oil drug as a dangerous drug. Secondly, the second proposal concerns 6 substances. This is in line with the international practice, and we are to fulfill the international obligation as well as to build a safety net for members of the public. How come we have decided to, within a short period of time, further revise the ordinances? We mostly target analogs of eptomidate in this amendment. This February, we listed metomidate, proposate, as well as isoproposate as dangerous drugs or dangerous substances. However, these 3 substances do not cover all dangerous substances that may be used as space oil drug or other types of drug. In order to nip the problem in the bud, we want to take a preemptive step and list all analogs of etomidate in the ordinance. According to the government lab, etomidate analogs that may be used to produce space oil drug, their chemical structures could be changed. They are like Legos. Our suggestion is that regardless of how the Legos are changed, these substances are illegal substances. It's just like no matter how a monster changes its form, it's still a monster. We want to prevent any substances that could be used to produce space oil drug to be banned. On the 14th of February, the Law Enforcement Department included space oil drug as an illegal substance, and a number of operations have been mounted involving 255 cases. We have successfully intercepted 150,000 e-cartridges from going into the market. We have arrested some 300 people as well. We've also used testing kit in different areas in our patrol. We've been using it since January the 18th, and we have already used the testing kit on 54 people as at the end of April. In the March meeting, we already briefed members in detail about our proposal, but we will repeat it here again. Through different channels, we have educated the public. This includes putting up banners and organizing large-scale seminars as well as talks and exhibitions. You can see from here some of our educational and publicity efforts. In year 2022, we refurbished the anti-drug space at Jockey Club, and we've also held guided tours. In year 2024, we introduced a dedicated section that covers information about space oil drug. We've also invited experts as well as doctors to hold talks for parents concerning space oil drugs. We've also held the Anti-Space Oil Drug Week campaign to enhance students' knowledge about the space oil drugs, and we also want them to stay away from drugs in an intensive manner. We've set up booths concerning space oil drugs at 2 post-secondary institutions to tell people about the harm of space oil drugs. We also have rehabilitation services for drug abusers. We have adopted the 5 approaches shown here to help people quit drugs. Apart from space oil drugs, we also pay attention to the global trend about drugs. We, from time to time, include newly emerged drugs under our legislations. Paragraphs 13 to 19 have to do with this proposal. This March, at the 68th session of the UN Commission in Narcotic Drugs, member states adopted the recommendation by the WHO to place 6 dangerous substances under international control. After the meeting, the SAR government acted swiftly and consulted the relevant stakeholders to include these 6 dangerous substances under our control. We've consulted the trade as well as the standing committee. The proposal is to include the substances as shown here under Part 1 of the first schedule to the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance, or DDO. We hope that members will support the 2 proposals mentioned in this paper. Lastly, I'd like to stress that the government has been paying attention to the trend about drugs. If necessary, we will nip the problem in the bud and amend the legislations if necessary. Thank you, Commissioner, for the briefing. This entails 2 legislative proposals. I'll pass the floor to members now. 5 members have asked to speak. They are Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Gary Chen, Mr. Benson Look, Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, and Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. We have ample time. I'll give 5 minutes for each member, including questions and answers. Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am all for the legislative proposals. I think it is necessary to legislate for this. I have two questions concerning the newly listed substances. On the testing of these substances, are the current testings capacities enough to cover the 6 substances? Do we have to develop new testing technologies for these 6 substances? Secondly, on the drug abuse situation of students over the past 10 years or so, we see that students take drugs mostly for the same reasons, mainly because of peer pressure, curiosity, depression, stress, or anxiety. In dealing with depression, stress, and anxiety, I see that the percentage went up from 40.5% in 2008 to 46% in 2024. So I have the following questions concerning education and publicity as well as to combat the new types of drugs that emerged. How has the Commissioner been working with different government departments to help students cope with peer pressure and stress problems? How have we been offering help to students to prevent them from being exposed to drugs or getting addicted to drugs? Now, apart from the publicity efforts you mentioned, are there any other more updated ways to educate or guide students in the government's anti-drug efforts? Now, about half of the schools in Hong Kong have not joined the Healthy School program. How are you going to encourage schools to take part in the program? Will you ask them to join the program in a mandatory manner?
3 questions, Commissioner. Well, I'll leave some of the questions to Government Labs head to answer the question. Now, let me turn to the reasons for drug abuse and also the Healthy School campaign. Well, with regard to the reasons for taking drugs, well, there are some deep-rooted reasons, for example, emotional needs and also peer pressure and so on. So we have also talked to some other departments, including mainly the Education Bureau, so that we can work together, so that there would also be multidisciplinary efforts to deal with that. For example, we do have training for teachers so that we would be able to help them to identify these students in an early stage if they have a tendency to abuse drugs. And we have also put in place parent education, and we do have continuous education for parents. And in the coming summer holidays, we would also be stepping up such efforts with schools, because we understand that during the summer holidays they do not have to go to school, and that would also be a high risk period. And therefore, in terms of parent education, we would also have to talk to the parents to ensure that they would be able to understand their children's needs, so that they'd be able to help them deal with their emotions. And also, you talk about the drug info center. We would also ask. We would also organize talks so that psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers would also explain to parents as to how they can deal with their children's emotional problems. And we don't just test these students. We do have a series of programs with the Healthy School program, so that we'd be helping them to have a positive attitude towards different issues. And we would also organize activities so that they can have a healthy and positive lifestyle. So all these together would hopefully help the students and young people to deal with some of the deep-rooted reasons for taking drugs. With regard to the Healthy School campaign, I understand that schools would have some anxieties or misgivings about this, and therefore we have been explaining this to the schools. In fact, what we have been doing under the program, we have done that for 10 years now, and I'm sure they all understand that the labeling effect basically is non-existent. And we have also been explaining to schools about this, and we are pleased to see that for the school year 2025-26, we have received some applications from some new schools that has gone up by some 10%. So over half of the secondary schools have taken part in this Healthy School program. Next, Dr. Chair. Yes, the government lab does pay attention to the emergence of new drugs, and we do have new testing methods. And for the proposed drugs, we have already got rapid test kits to test those drugs present. Next, Mr. Hacken Chen. 2 parts, Madam Chair. On the first part, as the Narcotics Commissioner has said earlier on, we have already put in place new laws to deal with the new substances, and it's just a couple of months ago, and now you're coming to us to propose some new amendments on some new substances. My question is, why is it so urgent? Yes, of course, we will have to ban these substances. How come just a few months ago, when you came to us to propose the new amendments, well, why is it that you did not propose such substances? Is it that they only emerged during the past few months or not? If they were already present a few months ago, then why did you not do so? Or why did you not cover ethyl mydate and other analogs should have been covered, and they were also susceptible to abuse? So that would also explain why we have to enact legislation so urgently now. So is it because you omitted that during the last exercise? And also I can see that there is a general decline in terms of the drug abuse population. But then if you look at the number of students taking drugs, I think there has been a moderate increase by some 2.7% according to your surveys. So at schools, and if you look at student drug abuse problems, it's still very much a matter of concern. And I would describe this, that is for the space oil drug, if you were to identify that among students, it would not be hard. It's quite common. And therefore, I believe that the administration should attach importance in dealing with this. And therefore, my request is for the government to make use of the internet channels in order to crack down on this problem. Because basically, they would be purchasing such drugs online through their cell phones and so on. And if you're able to do a bit more, you should be able to reduce the supply. And secondly, for the healthy school program, I understand that you have some drug testing methods. I don't know whether or not ethyl mydate can also be tested. Well, do you have rapid test kits available for that? And also, you talk about peer influence, and that would be one of the important factors for many first drug abusers. So, that being the reason, how can you deal with that from the school's perspective? Or can you do something more proactive in preventing students from taking drugs? Because that might be one of the main reasons for students taking space oil. So can you effectively suppress the problem? Well, can the healthy school program be further enhanced in order to deal with that problem? So 3 main areas of questions, Bureau Commissioner. Well, let me answer the first question, and then I'll ask Superintendent Ng to deal with the issue concerning online sales of drugs. The reason why we have come back to this council for further amendments shortly after our last exercise. Well, first, on the ethyl mydate analogs, well, worldwide, it's a very new drug, and therefore Hong Kong has been one of the first to legislate on this. Well, last time we included ethyl mydate and 3 analogs in our law. That's because Hong Kong and other places have also identified such space oil drugs, and we felt that is a problem. But then for other places, they haven't been able to identify such substances, and therefore many other places are doing the same as we do, and they are also trying to include proton nitazine and also methyl nitazine and other analogs in their law. And we have also conducted a number of studies. We have noticed that other than the 3 analogs that we proposed in our last exercise, the other analogs are also causing problems, and therefore we are trying to cover them more on this occasion. And therefore we are proposing that these be included in our DDO, so that we'd be able to cover the situation so that they can no longer abuse such drugs. We have also noticed that many students, as we can see from our study, that is some 2.7% of the students have had experience of taking drugs before. And that is also in line with our earlier answer to Ms. Doreen Kong, that we'll have to work with schools, social workers, and multidisciplinary professionals so that we would help the students to adopt a positive attitude to life in order to deal with the problem at its roots. And whether or not there would be a further review on the Healthy School program, and whether or not there can be further widening of the scope and so on. And we would also be introducing the rapid test kits for E2MyDate, but then since it involves all the students, and therefore we have to be very careful in terms of both the accuracy of the test kits as well as how we should introduce that to schools. So we are exploring different approaches to see how we can introduce the rapid test kits to schools under the Healthy School program. Can we ask Mr. Ng to explain to us how you tackle the problem online? Yes, the police would mount online operations from time to time, including undercover operations. And also, we would also ask network suppliers to remove such sales sites. And we have also mounted the territory-wide operations, arresting some 114 people and seized 227 kilograms of drugs of different kinds. We would continue with such efforts in order to tackle the problem of online sales of drugs. Next, Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, earlier on, the administration came to this panel to report on E2MyDate related problems. I already asked the question whether or not there might be emerging substances under the space oil category that might be subject to abuse. And the administration said that there were only very few such substances. But then at the same time, we have noticed that in other places they have found similar substances being abused. And that's the reason why the administration has now come back again for further legislation. And then we have been told that for the time being, the 6 analogs to be legislated have not been widely abused. But then once again, can I ask the administration this? That is, on the whole, in terms of tackling the problem of abusing E2MyDate, well, on top of the current legislation, have you identified new dangerous substances coming in the pipeline? And also, under the list of drugs that you're going to tackle, have you identified they're being abused in Hong Kong? And yet, I can see that you've been able to seize some 150,000 cartridges, and also some 315 drugs have been seized. I can see that they have been smuggled into Hong Kong from overseas countries. They have not been manufactured in Hong Kong. So what about the raw materials? Where were they produced? So in terms of tackling the problem at source, what have you done so far? Can you tell us more? The third question is about the abuse situation by the young people. Yes, I can see that the administration has mounted very extensive publicity campaign. We can see that it's everywhere. But then, if you look at those who are under 21 abusing drugs, you can see that there is a steady growing trend. And then you also said that that's because they have been influenced by E2MyDate, and because of the increase in the number of people abusing E2MyDate analogs drugs. That's the reason why you have seen an increase. And also in public transport, you can see that many young people are actually abusing space oil drugs. And according to some frontline teachers, they've also told me that, well, sometimes even at schools, they also suspected that some students were abusing space oil, and sometimes their fellow students would also report the cases to the teachers. Yes, you have this Healthy School program, and yet when we see that some students in schools are suspected to have been abusing such space oil drugs, then have you got any recommendations for schools as to how they should deal with such students? And I can see that, well, dealing with such students would be equally important, if not more, than mounting more publicity campaigns. Well, on tackling the problem at source, I'll leave it to the Customs and Excise to answer the question. As to whether or not we have identified other substances being abused, well, on this occasion, if you look at the proposal on the drugs to be put under control, for the time being, we have not found other new substances being abused. But then, as you said, we would not confine ourselves to Hong Kong. We do have contacts with our overseas counterparts in order to exchange intelligence as to what new substances have been abused. Secondly, it's about the 6 substances that are to be put under control. Well, for the 6 substances, we have managed to found a small amount of HHC in the substances being abused, and therefore it's not very commonly abused in Hong Kong. Another one is called cariprodol. It's a prescription drug in Hong Kong, and therefore it's lawful in Hong Kong, but then it's not the first tier of drugs being used in Hong Kong. And only doctors can prescribe the use of this drug, and it can also be substituted by other drugs, and therefore after the passage of the new legislation, the use of this drug will not be affected. And also, your next question is about how schools should deal with the problem. Well, we do have protocol as to how schools should deal with students taking drugs. There are guidelines for them, and if they identify such problems, they can always approach the police in the district. We have police liaison officers to deal with such situations. And in every police district, we also have counseling center for abusers of psychotropic drugs, and therefore schools can refer their students to these counseling centers for counseling. Indeed, even under the Healthy School program, if we identify students who have abused drugs under the rapid test system, we would also arrange for case conferences to be held so that parents and teachers would work together to help the students. So I'll pause here, and then I'll leave it to my colleague from the CNS to answer the following questions.
Mr. Lau, the Customs and Excise Department has been paying high attention to the drug. We have been adopting a risk-based approach, and we have year-round operations. And at high-risk places, we do sampling checks. We also keep in close communication and intelligence exchange with overseas law enforcement agencies so that we have an idea of the origins of space oil drugs. This will allow us to, where appropriate, adjust our law enforcement strategies to take effective actions to stop Etomidate from entering the local market. Well, my question is not just about how the administration combat Etomidate. Well, do you know where the Etomidate is from? Have you tracked the place of origin? Well, according to the cases we have dealt with, the major place of origin includes Malaysia, Thailand, as well as India, mostly in the Southeast Asia region. Next, Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have been very worried about the impacts of drugs on young people. We are worried about hidden cases. We looked at the statistics, and we see that mostly young people, they take drugs at their friend's home or their own homes. For young people aged below 21, in year 2024, we know that young people took drugs in other places other than their friends' homes or their homes. Do you know where they took drugs? Are these private premises? Do you have any plans to combat these premises? Secondly, as mentioned by other members, we have talked about online sales of drugs. There are order sheets for different types of drugs. The administration said there were decoy operations and people were arrested. I want to know what kind of penalties did the arrested people have to suffer? Will you enhance the penalty level to create or enhance deterrence? While there are decoy operations from the police, there are still people who managed to escape or run away from their responsibility. There are messaging apps nowadays, and it might not be easy for you to detect hidden cases even with decoy operations. Will there be reporting hotlines? Or are there ways for people to report cases through WhatsApp or online channels? So that when young people get order sheets for drugs, or when parents notice that their children are taking space oil drugs, or when teachers found that there are students taking space oil drugs in school toilets, they will be able to report the cases to the police. Will they be able to report cases through WhatsApp or hotline services? This will allow the police to arrest more people who sell space oil drugs online. Now turning to what happened in schools. We see media reports about students taking space oil drugs at schools from time to time. How many schools have actually made reports to the police, and how many arrests have been made by the police because of the reports? There might be media reports about these cases, but is it the truth that no one has been arrested in schools? We are concerned about this. Also, on your cooperation with schools, it might have to be stepped up. Students, for various reasons, such as depression, peer influence, or other reasons, may want to try taking drugs. They are exposed to space oil drugs very easily these days. We might have to step up students' ability to stay away from drugs. Do you have any plans to help them do so? Commissioner, 4 questions. Firstly, on hidden cases. We have looked at what premises where drug taking was found. They are mostly public places like party rooms. The Narcotics Division have already stepped up education. We have talked to Wi-Fi service providers that provide Wi-Fi services for party rooms so that we can disseminate or post ads. These ads are to remind young people not to take drugs. So if you use the Wi-Fi services in party room, you'll get our ads. Now on court cases. So far, no rulings or judgments have been made by courts in relation to these cases since our legislative proposal took effect in February this year. However, according to our record or surveys, people aged below 21, if they are caught, there is an 80% to 90% chance that they will be convicted. So please don't take risks. Don't think that you are young and you will not be convicted or sentenced. If we have the relevant rulings or judgments from the court, we will disseminate the information. As to whether we will set up a hotline for people to report cases, we will think about this carefully. This is a very good suggestion. If schools need help from the police, we have a liaison officer in each district, and schools have the contact number of the liaison officers. They may communicate with the officers. As to figures concerning the number of reports made by schools, we don't have a breakdown on that, so we aren't able to provide this number now. On the ability of students to stay away from drugs, we are currently working towards helping students become more positive. We want to enhance their knowledge about drugs. We want to teach them how to stay away from drugs. We also want to transform their actions. So through activities about positive education, we want to transform their emotions. We know that in party rooms there are ads about drugs. Other than the anti-drug messages, will you step up law enforcement actions in party rooms? Well, these are high-risk premises. Whether online or offline, including party rooms, we step up law enforcement actions. Mr. Ng, anything to add on law enforcement? When we take anti-drug operations, we look at places where people take drugs in each district, and based on this information, we deploy operations accordingly. Next, Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. According to the paper, space oil drugs are the most common types of drugs taken by young people aged below 21. This trend is very worrying. What is the reason behind the rapid growth of space oil drugs? Has the government conducted any detailed analysis to study why young people like taking space oil drugs so much? Is it because young people are easily exposed to space oil drugs, or is it because this kind of drug is very cheap? Or is it because young people find it cool to take e-cigarettes? Is it a kind of behavior that makes young people feel they are cool? Or is it because space oil drugs make them feel happy? Are young people under the impression that space oil drugs are not harmful? Have you done any detailed analysis or studies on this? Also, I want to know more about anti-drug resources. Space oil drugs is a rather new type of drugs. To help young people quit, do we have enough resources? And what are the differences between the approach used to help young people quit drugs compared to the past when young people took the traditional types of drugs? Mr. Lee. Our frontline workers, including healthcare workers, have done some detailed analysis. There are 7 major reasons why they take space oil drugs. It is easy to consume space oil drugs. Easy to consume meaning that, well, there are different flavors, such as mango flavor, green tea flavor, and they can easily consume space oil drugs. Well, is it because the space oil drugs can be added to e-cartridges, not that they can put it in the mouth, in the sense they can easily consume it? Right. Well, it's not easily noticeable, and also the effect comes and goes quickly. It's rather cheap, and also there is no significant harm to their health. Some misunderstand that e-cigarettes are legal, so that space oil drugs are also legal. So based on these reasons, we have launched a series of publicity campaigns in a targeted manner. As mentioned, a lot of them consume space oil drugs with e-cigarettes. So if LegCo manages to pass the bill about e-cigarettes, then this will help us combat space oil drugs. Also, a deeper reason is because of peer pressure, depression, and boredom. And to tackle these, we have another set of measures to help young people. For example, we educate and we help train parents and educational workers and so on. Mr. Ma Feng Kwok asked about whether there are enough resources to tackle space oil drugs. Well, I want to say that anti-drug is a person-to-person work. Over the past few years, we have allocated new resources to tackle space oil drugs. All along, we have adopted a multi-pronged approach. This includes in-hospital services and rehabilitation services. And all these approaches cover space oil drugs. According to frontline social workers, people who take space oil drugs, they are of a very young age, so they need one-on-one help from social workers. They need also help with their academic performance, their study, or their mental health being. So we need to pay more attention to these young people.
What about the time that would be needed? It ranges from several months to longer. It depends on the time that they have taken drugs, and also whether or not they are fully aware of the fact that they are abusing drugs, and therefore there might be a problem. And if they have this awareness, then they would have a greater motivation to get rid of the drugs. And if they are only forced by their parents to read the drugs, then they might take a bit longer because they are not fully aware of the harm that could be done to them by the drugs. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll have to control the time better because we will have to hand over the room to the next meeting by 4:30. We have a few more members, including Johnny Ng, Edmund Wong, Carmen Khan, and Chow Man Kong. Yes, space oil can be hidden very easily, and it can also spread very rapidly among youngsters, and we are very concerned about this. I think we have discussed this on more than one occasion, and we can see that the administration has taken a proactive approach in targeting them, and therefore we are very pleased about this. So that we hope that we would be able to deal with the problem at different levels that would also help curb the spread of space oils drugs amongst youngsters. In terms of testing, I can see that it's quite difficult because many people are taking these drugs at their own homes or their friends' homes. So how do you do the testing? So what are the tools or devices available for testing such drugs, and are they effective? And also, has our neighbors are using the same method to test these drugs? Would it be effective? Because there might be people who are prepared to take the risk in smuggling the drugs to those who are not in the know. And secondly, in terms of the statistics, after the young people have abused space oil drugs, will they switch to other more harmful drugs, for example, heroin and other types of drugs that are more prominent in Hong Kong and other places? Does that mean that their addiction would become deeper, and as a result they might need to take other drugs as well? Well, in terms of the testing kits, yes, for the first generation we have the test papers and test kits that are made available to police officers and those working at the front line. They have been proven effective because, as I said, we have already arrested 54 people after the tests have been found positive. Secondly, the Customs and Excise Department has also been using a new device to test space oil's presence. And these methods have been effective in tackling the problem and preventing them from being smuggled into Hong Kong. So such devices have been widely used in other places, and they've been proven effective in tackling the problem of smuggling space oil products into Hong Kong. Secondly, about the collection of data, is it possible for us to prove that they might switch to other types of drugs? Well, space oil drugs have only emerged for about a year in Hong Kong, and therefore, for the time being, we still haven't got sufficient evidence to show that drug abusers would also switch to other drugs. But then, according to our colleagues and also those working at the front line, indeed there are signs that drug abusers might also switch to other types of drugs, for example, cannabis and so on, because they could also be tempted into taking other forms of drugs after they have tried space oils. Okay, I can see that Mr. Dennis Leung has also pressed the button. So 3 members will be permitted to ask questions in one go, and then we will ask the Commissioner to answer the questions so that we can end by 4:30. Okay, Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the average age for people taking drug for the first time was 19, but then 720 would be under 21, but then 4,300 would be over 21. It shows that for those under 21, they are indeed very young, and then many of them are actually very close to age 21, and that's the reason why the average age would be 19. But then in any case, definitely many of these drug abusers would be those who are still at school, and therefore I'd like to know who is the youngest age of drug abuse is what. And also, you talk about going into the schools to identify the problems, but what about parents? What can they do? Because they are in they are in close contacts with their children, and therefore, if they are able to identify the problem, that would also be helpful. So, can you answer the 2 questions? Next, Mr. Chow Man Kwong. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can see that the approach adopted by the administration is to tighten the survival space for space oil, and therefore it should be supported. And I can see that what you're doing is that in the past you would list out the exact substance that would be under control, and now you're just listing out the analogs of such drugs. So would that mean that your future enforcement work would be made easier if you just list out analogs of this, so that so long as you have analogs being used, and then you don't have to get the scientists to test whether or not they would fall under the definition of this drug, and therefore in the past it might not be that easy, and from now on it would be a lot easier. And also you talk about random testing, and you also said that there was a slight increase in terms of the number of students abusing drugs, but then for the reported cases there is a declining trend. At the same time, whilst the figures might be contradictory, abusing cannabis seem to be rather prominent. So can you step up your efforts in tackling the problem in schools, and also prevent young people from coming into contact with such drugs? Madam Chair. Well, in tackling the problem of space oil abuse, I think there is still some room for improvement. And secondly, on the random test of drug abuse, yes, the percentage is very similar, 2.5, 2.7%. Still, the problem is serious. And if we are able to identify the drug abusers, can we do anything to let them know that taking drugs would have very serious consequence? We will definitely step up our efforts. Commissioner, can you give an integrated reply on schools and also on the age of abuse, and also whether or not you can help them to get rid of such addiction? Yes, thank you for your questions. First, on the age of abuse, for space oils, the lowest age of abuse would be 12 years. And we can also see that for space oils drugs, most of the people would be at age 16, 17. And then on parent education, we attach a lot of importance to that indeed. As I said earlier, well, before these before the summer holidays, we would also be organizing activities with schools, including talks for parents, and also in terms of the drug information or drug info centers and so on. We would also be organizing more talks for parents so that they would understand their children's emotional problems more readily. And we would also approach the parent-teacher association in order to help them manage the problem. And also on the testing of drugs, we are absolutely able to identify the emerging drugs or substance of abuse. And as I said, if we were to take the cases to the court, we would also have to have the government's laboratories report before we can successfully prosecute. And therefore, whether it's some of the existing drugs like cannabis and so on, all along the court would always require the government lab's reports before the case can be put before the court. And therefore, the government lab would be doing the same this time. And on whether or not there would be alternative ways of helping the schools to deal with these problems. As I said, we have the Healthy School program. We would see what we can do to, include the test kits for space oil drugs. And also, we would also include elements of anti-space oil drug abuse in our campaign and so on. And also the mandatory treatment program. Well, for the time being, Hong Kong has adopted this voluntary approach, but then if students have been found to have abused drugs, then as I said, there would be a case conference, and then parents, teachers, and social workers would be involved in helping the students to see what can be done, and they would also be referred to drug abuse centers for counseling services. Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I've heard you say that, under the smoking control legislation, one of the suggestions is that for alternative cigarette products, they would also be banned, and you said that that would also be effective in tackling the problem of space oil drugs. I'd like to consult you on this. Yes, definitely, there would be this synergy effect, because as you can see, for space oil products, they would be using e-cigarettes as the host for this, and it would make it very easy for them to take this drug, because it's unlike other forms of drugs. For example, heroin, they would also have to do it by way of injection, and then for ice, they would also have to take it through some devices and so on. But then for e-cigarettes, that would be very convenient for people to take such drugs in the form of e-cigarettes. So if we have legislation to reduce the supply of e-cigarettes so that they would be banned from public places and so on, that would also achieve a synergy effect. Thank you. Okay, that's all for this subject. Last item, AOB. There is no AOB, and I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.